Hey everyone, how you doing today? Really glad to be here on this Tuesday morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Thrilled to be here again. I'm the Ron Turba. I'm the author of the upcoming Heavenly Treasury series about God's financial abundance for your life. All right, and so what we're going to be talking about today is sort of a continuation of what we talked about the last time, which is reigniting your dreams. And the previous session was quite a bit intensive. For those of you who didn't watch it, I would highly recommend it, and you can go back and watch it as your leisure. If you're not sure where it is, if it's already been removed from the Twitch recording studio, you can hit the recordings, save recordings, right below the stream, and you'll be able to access it and watch it as many times as you want. So in that video, we talked about two what we call marketplace movers, which is the biblical category where you fall in when it comes to where you are in the marketplace. And so the first two we talked about were the servant and the slave. And the main goal of that and the main conclusion of that is that we're not supposed to be forever servants. We're not supposed to be forever employees, no matter where we are. Now, again, this isn't to say that there's never going to be a time in your life where you are an employee, okay? Not saying that whatsoever. Some people may disagree with that. That's perfectly fine with you, perfectly fine with me, all right? If you grew up in a very poor neighborhood and nobody in your life has ever done anything well financially, you're probably going to end up starting as an employee. Okay, nothing wrong with that. The Lord says, do not despise the day of small beginnings. All right, and then as you move forward, you're going to increase and increase and increase. So what I'm going to do with these reigniting your dreams sessions is giving you that roadmap of where you are now and where you should end up. So what we're going to do today is going to talk about the next one, all right, which is the laborer. Now, last time I kind of summarized it and ended it with, well, should I do one session on the laborer and the master or split it up? And so after further discussion and further meditation on it, I decided to split them up into each section. Each one gets their own. So the laborer comes first and then the master. All right, but to just do a brief recap, what we're going to do is this. We talked about the 4 levels of vision last time, which is number 1, providing your necessities. Next level, providing your dreams. Next level, providing somebody else's dreams. And number 4, providing your legacy. Legacy meaning people who aren't even born yet. You're already providing for them with the abundance that God has for you. All right, and so that's where you're going to end up at the end. All right, so in that first 2, again, servant and slave. Barely touched on slave because it hardly ever exists anymore. Servant is what we really focused on the entire time. And in the end, we discussed that we can't be a forever employee. And the biblical logic for that was Psalm 23:5, which is, thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Your cup cannot run over if your boss has a lid on it. And again, if you're an employee and God wants to bless you, more often than not, he has to bless your boss. Now, there are exceptions to that. If you're a waiter watching this, anyone at any time could walk into your restaurant and give you a $1,000 tip. Don't speak death over it. It could happen. And you can provoke God's grace to be able to do that. And we'll talk about that in future sessions as well. And I really like that because I talked about that quite extensively in the series, is that it doesn't really matter where you are. God can bless you in some sort, but there are avenues where he can bless you even more, because you need to have an avenue and a cup for God to pour oil into. And so a waiter is actually one of those. All right. Again, assuming your boss doesn't steal your tips, which does happen. All right. My daughter's last job at a coffee shop, her employer did keep all of the tips. All right. There are situations like that. But if you do have a place, even if you're earning a wage, an hourly wage, you can still have a place where God can bless you in. All right. So don't put that aside. Okay. And in the end, we also talked about a lot of the societal hindrances when it comes to the earlier generations, my generation, the millennials, and the ones that follow, as opposed to the ones that the Gen X's and baby boomers that are now getting seasoned in their age. All right. We can all talk about as we get older, but more seasoned sounds a little bit better. All right. And so as you get more seasoned, you get more knowledge, more wisdom, and all of that, so to speak, and you become a lot more valuable to the Lord when you do have that as well. So we talked about a lot of the things that millennials and earlier generations do have to deal with. And there's a reason for that. And I'll get to that right at the end of this recap, is that, again, one of them was housing prices. I just saw this morning that the Case-Shiller Index, which is a 20-city survey of housing prices, just hit an all-time high. And that's with mortgage rates also hitting a 20-year high. Okay? So if you topple the high mortgage rate with the high home price, the average home price, if you calculate that out, is about $3,000 a month after your down payment. Again, putting the debt argument aside, we'll get to that in future sessions, but just even from a worldly perspective, $3,000 a month just to own your own average home. Not a nice home, an average home, median home. Okay, good luck with that. Okay, I just saw an article just before I came on here. Bozeman, Montana, average home price over $1 million. Bozeman, where's that? Right? It's freezing 8 months out of the year. It's snowing all the freaking time. But in the summer, it's beautiful. I've been to Montana. It's beautiful up there. All right. Montana has about, a couple 100,000 people full time. But in the summer months, it goes over 1 million. All right. And so for whatever reason, that home price has gone through the roof. And that has tripled since COVID. Tripled. I mean, if you're my age in Bozeman, Montana, trying to buy $1 million home is average, good luck. All right. And again, millennials and younger generations also have to deal with higher crimes that when our older generations weren't around, they didn't have to deal with as much. There's less social cohesion. We've talked about that. Less pride in America as well. Public school systems are dramatically different. Again, not getting one way or the other, but just a good example. In the 1950s, most public schools used to have gun clubs and shooting ranges on the property. Kids would bring in their rifles and shoot them as recreation. If you're watching this and you're 70 or 80 years old, you probably had a shooting club at your high school. Imagine trying to have a shooting club today in anywhere in America. All right, imagine the reddest conservative Oklahoma small town couldn't even do that. Good luck. All right, and again, this is just saying differences. Okay, and then of course less job opportunities that can provide a middle class income for a family of four. Okay, and there's a reason why I say a middle class income for a family of four is because a family of four is you, your spouse, and 2 kids. 2 kids means population stability. That's just population stability. That's not population growth. Okay, we have a negative birth rate in America, and this is one of the reasons why. It's because of all these economic hindrances that my generation and younger have to deal with that olders didn't have to. Again, and now why am I talking about this? Because if you're going to achieve what God wants you to achieve and the financial abundance you're supposed to have in Christ, you can't do it the same way the previous generations did. All right, and you're going to notice one very, very good thing about this broadcast and content that you aren't going to find anywhere else is that I'm not going to focus on criticism. You're not going to see me go bash my elders and say, well, you did this and now you're giving this to me. I'm not going to do that. And there's a reason for that. Yes, there's plenty of blame to go around to a lot of groups of people. A lot of groups of people. It's not just your parents. There's a lot of other factors that factor into that. But if you focus on who's responsible, then all you're going to do is sit in your corner and blame them. You're going to sit in your corner and blame somebody. And if you criticize and blame somebody, then it takes the focus off of the mirror, which is in front of you, and onto somebody else, and that keeps you stagnant. God does not want you stagnant. He wants you increasing. He wants you moving forward. He wants you living an abundant life. He wants you living an abundant life financially. He doesn't want you struggling. Just like you would never want to see your kid homeless, God doesn't want to see you homeless either. He loves you that much. If you were the only person that he sent Jesus to die for, he still would have done it. That's how much he loves you. And if God loves you that much, imagine how much more you love your own personal kids, your own biological kids. All right, you don't want to see them struggle, and God doesn't want to see you struggle either. He wants you to have everything you want out of this life. And of course, that takes finances. Whether or not you like it, it does take finances. Feeding the homeless takes finances. Paying off somebody's debt is finances. Building a church, all right, starting a business, all of that takes finances. So let's not discount that and say, okay, we have to talk about this. We have to get in God's financial flow for your life and live the abundant life that he has called you to live. He hasn't called you to stay where you are. He's called you to increase. And not just for yourself, but for others as well. We talked about that a lot in the previous vision as well, previous video, okay? So that's the reason why, and in summary, why we discussed what we did in the prior video, okay? And there's scriptures to go along with that. So now, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what we call the laborer, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with scripture and see where it takes us. So I'm going to start in 2 Chronicles chapter 2, okay? 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 2. And I'm going to read this verse. This is the laborer in a nutshell. Then King Solomon enrolled 70,000 men to bear burdens, 80,000 hewing stone in the mountains, and 3,600 to oversee them. That is a laborer. You saw 3 people getting 3 different skill sets for a single project. All right. In this verse 1 was, and King Solomon gave word to build a house in the name of the Lord, and a house for his reign. So he's put on the project and has the financing to be able to build a house for the Lord. King David gathered up those resources. King Solomon was tasked to build it. All right. And so this is what this is. If let's say you're one of those 70,000 men to bear burden, or 80,000 hewing stone in the mountain. Hewing stone means carving the stone. You take a big rock out of the mountain, you carve it up into the shape it's supposed to be, and you put it where King Solomon has directed his overseers to put that in order to make the house of the Lord and make it magnificent. So in this case, a stone hewer would be considered a laborer. What does that mean? King Solomon had a project, okay? There was work to be involved. And a stone hewer came and said, hey, I can hew stone. Here's my price. And King Solomon said, okay, we'll pay it. Go hew the stone. And then once you're done, you're gone. Once you're done, you're gone. That's the definition of a laborer. Comes in, does some work, and then leaves. All right. So if you're a roofer, what do? You come in, you fix a roof, and you leave. And you go to the next roof. And you go to the next roof. And there's no one overseeing you saying you have to do this roof or you have to do that roof. You're a laborer. You're in charge of your own labor. That's very different from an employee. An employee has a boss who directs them in every single move, and the work never stops. The work never stops. That is a big difference between a servant and a laborer. The laborer is in control. The employee is not. The laborer owns his own labor. The employee does not. Okay? Now, again, there's a lot of things that have to go into being a laborer that don't go into being an employee. Okay, there's different skill sets, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So for another example of a laborer would be an author. An author is somebody who's bringing a good or service to the market. An editor who edits that book that the author has written. If you're in IT, more than likely you're a laborer, because a client is doing an upgrade project. You come in, do the coding, and then you leave to the next one. There's always people constantly upgrading your software, so you're going from project to project to project. That's a laborer. That's perfectly great, all right, for you to own your own labor and not have somebody else breathing down your neck saying, go here, go here, go here, go here, go here. You choose whether you go there or there. You're the one who determines your wage. You're the one who says, this is my wage. This is what I'm worth. And I know you can pay it because I'm worth every single penny that you are. And there's a lot that goes into that labor as well. A hairstylist, in a sense, could be a laborer if they rent a chair from a big office and say, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars per month. I'm gonna rent this chair from you, and then I'll charge what I charge to my clients and bring them in. That's a laborer also. Real estate agent is also a good example of a laborer. You have a home to sell. Then when you're done selling that home, you can either go to your broker and say, hey, I need more homes to sell, or you can just go home. You can just go home because you're in charge. You own your time and you own your labor. That's what a laborer is. Someone who's in charge of their own labor. It's not dictated by a boss. All right. Ultimately, no matter where we are working for God, and God is ultimately our boss, and he tells us where to go and what to do. Paul himself describes himself as a slave to Christ Jesus, saying, okay, I'm going to go where you want me to go. I'm going to do what you want me to do, and I'm going to say what you want me to say. Yes, that's part of it. But earthly, in the natural, no one is over us telling us how to go and where to go and how to do it. Most importantly, no one's telling you how to do your job. They only judge you by the outcome. They don't judge you by the input. That is a very big difference. And if you're somebody who is doing very well at their job, doing very good performance, but you don't feel like you're being recognized, that's a big difference when you will be recognized as a laborer, because they only care about your output. They don't care about your input. They don't care. They're not as big on the clothes you wear. They're not as big on how you actually physically laboring, whether you type left-handed or right-handed or one-handed or blindfolded or anything. They don't care. All they say is, hey, I'm upgrading my computer software. All right, tell me when it's done. That's all they care about. Okay? So that's the big difference between a laborer and a servant. A laborer has marketable skills that they bring into the job. A servant typically does not. Okay? What do I mean by that? If you're a servant at McDonald's, you don't know how to work the cash register. Somebody bought the cash register, bought the building that it's in, and then is giving you a skill set to be able to do that work as a cashier. That's also how a servant operates. And because you require all of that, you get paid less. Okay? All of that effort to get into the building that job for you was resources that somebody gave to somebody else, that as a laborer, all of those would go to you. Do you see the difference in how that compounds and how you can go literally double or triple your income overnight by being a laborer? That's how. Okay? So again, there's so much more when it comes to your marketable skill set as a laborer as opposed to a servant. And so as you move on to that, when you are a laborer, you can also increase your skill set because, again, the marketplace pays for value. It does. The marketplace pays for value, especially when they think your value is good. It's even more perceived value than it is real value because some of you they're terrible salesmen. And you can get a lot better. And the Lord wants you to get better because better sales skills mean more income, especially when you are marketing your own labor. So God doesn't want you to have poor skill sets here. He wants you to have great skill sets, and we'll be able to talk about those as well. So you can also increase your core skill set as opposed to what I call the supporting skill sets. You have to, if you're a laborer, you've got to be able to sell your labor. You've got to go to somebody and say, hey, I'm doing this. It's good. Here's my price. Here we go. You got to be able to market. You've got to be able to advertise. You've got to be able to negotiate. That's for sure. You've got to be able to negotiate, and you'll get there. I promise you'll get there. Once you start getting rolling, believe me, most of the time, if you're a servant right now and you're a forever employee, you're just hoping and praying that your boss gives you some raise or some sort of blessing, financial blessing for what you've been doing. That's not always the case, and it's going to be very, very difficult when you're a laborer to go on the other end and say, instead of, okay, what are you offering me? Here's what I can offer you. And you watch what happens when you speak with that boldness, you speak with that conviction, and you say, this is where I'm going. All right? You're either on board or you're not. Because if you're not on board, this guy is. And I'm going here instead. You do that instead. Watch what happens. Watch how many people want to attract your skill set now that weren't otherwise doing so. Okay? All right. So if we take a look lower in this 2 Chronicles passage, chapter 2, and we go down to verse 7, here's King Solomon saying, and now send me at once a man who knows to work in gold and in silver and in bronze and in iron and in purple and in crimson and blue, and knowing to engrave with the skilled men who are with me in Judah and Jerusalem, whom David my father has prepared. Okay? Think about that. They're looking for one specific man with one very valuable skill set. How much money do you think that guy's going to make? Okay? How does that translate into the real world? Let's say you're a car mechanic. Is it more? Do you get paid more for working on Fords or Ferraris? Which one? Fords or Ferraris? Now there is a very big difference between those. Yes, they all have engines. They have wheels. But guess what? There's a lot more intricacies when it comes to a Ferrari than there is a Ford. Okay? It's a lot more pricey, and there's a reason for that. It's because of all the intricate details under the hood and so much delicacy that goes into making that vehicle really like a work of art as opposed to a transportation motive. Okay? Nobody buys a Ford because they want to go show it off in a showroom. They want it because it's a good price, it's a good, reliable vehicle, and it takes me from point A to point B without breaking down. That's why I have my Ford. I drive a Ford pickup. That's why I have it. It's lasting me a very long time, and it's very, very valuable, and I love it. All right? If God tells me to sow it, I'll sow it, but while it's in my hands, it's very, very enjoyable, and I can't stress that enough. But when you're working on those Ferraris, you can't just the showroom floor. You can literally eat off of it. If you've ever been to, say, a Maserati dealership and you walk into where they're repairing the cars and fixing them, you could eat off of the showroom floor. That's how clean it is. They don't mess around. It's not full of dirt. It's not full of mud. It's not in somebody's backyard. It's a work of art. It really is, from start to finish. And that's why those cars cost so much to repair and so much to buy in the beginning. There's a lot to it beyond just the actual vehicle. And if you're a mechanic and you are happy doing those intricacies and those delicacies of fixing those cars and fixing them right, you're going to get paid a lot more than otherwise, okay? So let's say you are a car mechanic. What can you do right now, okay? So last time we got our vehicle serviced, it was about $100 an hour we were paying for labor. $100 an hour for what the vehicle that we serviced was costing us. Now, let me ask you this. Did the mechanic get paid $100 an hour? Zero chance. Zero chance. Okay? No one buying your average brand car is making $100 an hour or the equivalent of $200,000 a year. They're just not. Okay? Especially as a servant. So, what can you do if you are a mechanic and say, I want to be a laborer? This is just an example. It could work for you, but all right, in some way, shape, or form, but I'm focusing on the mechanic. So, if you have the skills, you can fix the cars, you can do them reliably. Guess what? People are going to want you. Everyone needs a good car mechanic. Everyone. I don't care who you are. You can be the richest guy on planet Earth. You need someone who's reliable with vehicles to be able to make sure you don't break down. The last thing you want is to go to a meeting, a very important meeting, where you're talking 7 to 8 figures in sales, and all of a sudden your car breaks down. People will pay for that reliability. And if you have that, watch what happens to your income. It's going up, 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 up. All right. And I can't wait to see it. All right. But if you are that mechanic, here's what you can do. You can, number one, you're going to need your own tools. If you have your own labor, you're going to need your own tools. Okay. That's going to cost some money. On top of that, where are you going to service your cars? If you have a home and your HOA isn't breathing down your neck, you could literally service them in your own parking lot, in your own home. And you can do that. So now guess what? Let's say you go through all those regulations and steps, and maybe you got to make it incorporate, you got to make it legal and all that stuff. Once you've gone through all that and you have a working business and you are a laborer now, guess what? You're not making $25 an hour anymore. You're making 50 to 75. And people will pay that. You think they won't? They will. For reliability for their vehicles, they will pay. Especially when they go to the brand name dealerships and they're charging them $80 to $100 an hour. Would you rather pay Big Ford $80 an hour or pay my friend $80 an hour whom I know can do a great job and can tell me the truth? And I know him personally. See? Get forward thinking. Watch what happens when you start wanting to increase. God will give you those ideas. God will give you those ideas. I'm just using a car mechanic as an example. You could be anything. You could be a computer guy right out of college making 40 or 50 grand a year on some software and some project. Guess what? Once you really get final with learning that skill set, now you're a laborer. Your income is about to double. It happened to me. I literally doubled my income going from a servant to a laborer. I kid you not. It happened, and I got fired from being a servant. 2 months later, I was hired as a laborer for twice the wage. I kid you not. It happened to me. It could happen to you in the right circumstances. Don't put God in this box and say, okay, well, I'll just go along. All things work out for his good, whatever happens. Don't do that. Say, I want to increase. I want to get in your flow, God. I want to follow you all the days of my life. I want to serve you with all my heart and soul. Everything I have in my business belongs to you. Tell me where to go. I'm working, but I'm hitting the ceiling. Tell me where to go. He'll tell you where to go. And you follow him and watch what happens. I'm telling you. All right? Don't ever feel like you're stuck. You're never, ever stuck with God. There's always another level. When God appeared in the dream to King Solomon and said, hey, I'll give you anything you want. And King Solomon said, give me wisdom. God said, I'm going to make you rich. Solomon was already making over $1 billion a year in tribute from other kingdoms. $1 billion a year. And God said, I'm going to make you rich. So don't ever think that God can't take you higher. Watch him. You get in his flow. You follow his principles. You commit wholeheartedly to him. And you stave off the enemy attacks. And you fight the good fight of faith, holding on to the promises that I'm going to tell you that are in the Bible that are yours that you haven't claimed yet. And you watch. There's guaranteed increase coming to you. Guaranteed increase. Watch it. Watch what happens. Okay? That's why you're supposed to be a laborer above a servant. All right? So that's what we're going to talk about right now. Okay? And what we have been for the past few minutes. So I hope that really gives you an understanding of where your next step is if you are a servant. If you are a servant, or even if you're looking to be a servant right now, again, I'm not going to say you can't do that or you shouldn't do it. But all right, especially if you've got 2 nickels to your name and need some income today, believe me, that's probably where you're going to end up being. But I will tell you this: focus on the area where you can learn a skill set that you can take to the market. Even if that's a lower wage today than some other opportunity, make sure you're in a place where you can learn a skill set that you can increase tomorrow. Learn the skill set today, master that craft, and move up. watch what happens. Okay. So focus on a place where you can learn a great skill set. That's what I cannot stress that enough. Okay. If you are a servant and you want to be a laborer, that's your first step. Because remember, God's not going to get you into that labor position if you don't have a skill set. He's not going to set you up to fail. You have to do the preparation work now, seeking him, doing the work now, and so the increase can come later, so you're ready to be that good cup that God can pour oil into. All right? That's your future. That's your future. Okay? But in the end, when it comes to our marketplace movers, that was the third. That was the laborer. Now, the fourth one we will talk about the later this week, likely on Thursday at the same time. All right? But as a preview, that's going to be the master. And we'll talk about that very, very in depth and how you can become a master even as a servant. Even right now, if you just have $20 to your name, you could be a master in the marketplace right now. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And all right, and your financial future, I promise you, is never going to be the same. But I do want to talk about a couple of things that kind of are going to push you from being a laborer to being a master. There's two problems that being a laborer cannot solve. All right, and I'm going to start with scripture, and when we're going to go to, lo and behold, King Solomon. All right, we're going to go to Proverbs this time. We're going to get out of 2 Kings. We're going to head to Proverbs. All right, Proverbs 23. Proverbs 23. Okay. Verse 4. Do not labor to be rich. Cease from your own understanding. That's King Solomon talking. Do not labor to be rich. So being a laborer will not get you rich, per se, the abundance that God has called you to live. You can't do that being a laborer. You can do much better than a servant, but where God wants you to be, not quite. You can't do that as a laborer. So why can't we do that? Okay? The most obvious is that there's only one of you and 24 hours in a day. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. What are you doing with it? Okay? A laborer only has 24 hours. Even if you work all 24 hours, somebody pays you by the hour, somebody pays you by the job as a laborer. So you can't get rich doing it that way because there's only one of you, and if you're not working, you're not earning. That's why we want to become a master. If you're not working, you're not earning. If you're anything other than a master, if you're not working, you're not earning. Okay? So again, two earthly problems that really cannot be solved by being a laborer. Number one is the cost of living. You cannot solve the cost of living problem as a laborer. All right? Eventually, it's going to run you over. And I'll tell you why in a second. But just to give you an example, everybody knows the cost of living has jumped big time since COVID, okay? And it has. I don't know if it's going to slow down. I don't know if it's going to increase. Lord only knows what they're doing with all the money, all right? And again, I study it quite a bit to be able to prepare you in advance. But again, God knows significantly more than I do when it comes to that area. He's helping me a lot along the way. But again, there's a lot of mechanics when it comes to the cost of living and why it is where it is. But it's been very, very obvious since COVID because they pumped $6 trillion in March of 2020 into the economy. Obviously, you don't do all that without a big increase in the cost of living. Okay? So what I want to do is kind of focus on what the level of money is required for you to generate enough to be a spouse, have a spouse and 2 kids. To have a spouse, 2 kids, and an abundant life. An abundant life with a spouse and 2 kids. In my opinion, that's the minimum that we should be aiming for. That's a good next step for you. Wherever you are, if you're already there, great. We've got better steps for you. But if you're not there, that's a great level to aim at. And ultimately speaking, if we think about this just on statistics, at the last I've checked, the average wage in America, the average wage, not the average income, but the average wage is $33,000 a year. So the average worker right now is earning $33,000 a year at their job. Okay. Now, multiple jobs obviously can take that higher. Okay. Median household income is about $65,000, $70,000 a year. So you can see it's not just one worker, one wage for all the household. But think about that. $33,000 a year. Let's just round it up to $36,000 a year. Divide that by 12 months out of the year. That's $3,000 a month before taxes. $3,000 a month before taxes. Okay. The average rent is, I just looked this up prior to the broadcast. The average rent, according to rent.com, is over $2,000 a month. Average. Not nice. Average. Okay? So that's $2,000 a month. Average car payment, according to CBS News, at the beginning of the year was $717 a month. Okay? Those two combined literally just ate up all of your income. Again, putting the debt argument aside, okay? We'll get to that in the future, but just on those two. Because again, when we're talking to the world, they're in the world, which means they're doing things the world's way, which means they have a lot of debt. And we'll get to debt in a lot sooner than you probably think. But when you're talking to the average person, which again, if you're going to win souls, you're talking to people who have a lot of debt. They're going to have a lot of debt, and one of those is a car payment. Most people do have a car payment. So if your average rent is $2,000 a month, your car payment is $717 a month. Those two combined literally just ate up your wage. Now think about that. And you wonder why people are struggling. You wonder why things are going to hell in a handbasket for a lot of people. Not for people in God's flow. Not for people in God's flow. They're going up and up and up. It doesn't matter what's happening to the world. They're going up, and they're going up. But for the average person in America, guess what? Okay? It's struggle time. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I decided to do this content, is to help people get into God's financial flow for ever increase in your life, including financial. Okay? So, cost of living cannot be solved as a laborer. It can't. Okay? In the end, it's going to run you over. On top of that, the other thing it can't solve is inflation. Like we just alluded to. Big increases since COVID. But what about prior to COVID? Okay? What is the average inflation rate, do you think? How much money did you lose every single year just by being alive for another 12 months? Have you thought about that? I know it's difficult to understand since COVID, but even prior to COVID, okay, when inflation wasn't super noticeable as it is now, what percent per year was it? Okay, and for me, I looked at two indexes. Number one, again, not to get into the nitty-gritty details, but I looked at what's called the Chapwood Index and the CPI as you calculate it in the 1980s, because the CPI as it calculated now is very different. If something becomes too expensive, they swap it out for something else. So if beef really jumps up, and they say, well, people aren't buying beef anymore, they're buying chicken. What they do is they swap out beef for chicken. Chicken's a lower price, so the CPI went down. They do that. There's a reason for that. All right? Again, because they want to make people feel good in their economic misery. That's why they do. That's the government's job, to make people feel good in their economic misery when the government's the one chopping off their leg. But putting that aside, okay, both of those indexes, the Chapwood Index and the CPI as you calculated in the 1980s, both show about 8% per year inflation prior to COVID. So 8% per year every single year. If your income is not going up 8%, you just went backwards. Okay? That's the reality of where we are today. Okay? That wasn't always the case. Okay? Prior to the Federal Reserve in 1913, prices actually went down over time. Believe it or not, if you look at inflation indexes from the 1800s, they actually went down all the time. Now, it would be spikes in the middle of the years, but on the long and the short of it, at the end, you could expect your prices to fall as you went forward. Our greatest economic time, the Industrial Revolution, economic input went through the roof. Prices actually fell. Now, that may be difficult to believe, but that's really what happened. So don't ever separate economic growth from inflation. You can have one without the other. But again, that was then. Okay, and the only two differences between that time were the Spanish-American War and the Civil War. Obviously, they pumped a lot of money to be able to fund those wars. Other than that, prices went down. Not since 1913. They've just gone up and up and up and up and up. On average, they're going up about 8%. Again, because of this big monetary experiment we had in 2020, that's very difficult to project in the future. A lot of people have gotten it very, very wrong over the past 3 years, and the people who got it wrong for the past 3 years are now trying to project the next 3 years. Good luck, okay? Either way, inflation is here, and it's going to continue to be here for a lot of other reasons. On top of that, what you probably didn't know is inflation is actually in the Bible too. It's hidden, but it's there. I want to show you this really, really quick. It's not comical because of the situation that was here, but to be able to see inflation in the Bible was very, very interesting. Okay? So, it's 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 24 to verse 25. And after this, it came to be that Ben-Hadad, the sovereign of Aram, mustered all his army and went up and besieged King Solomon. Okay, verse 25. And there was a great scarcity of food. And besieged Samaria, not King Solomon, Samaria, the town of Samaria. And there was a great scarcity of food in Samaria. And see, they besieged it until a donkey's head went at 80 pieces of silver, and 1/4 of a cab of dove droppings for 5 pieces of silver. So inflation did happen in the Bible. It wasn't because they printed a bunch of money. It was because of famine and a war. But it's there. Imagine paying $400 to feed a donkey's head to your family. That's what happened in a famine. That was in the Bible, believe it or not. Okay? So these things, they're not modern phenomenon that just made up out of thin air. They've been around for a long time, albeit under very different circumstances. Okay? So in the end, inflation is there. It's real, even if you don't see it in the price tag. You will see it in shrinkflation, where they shrink the size of the box. Think about the size of the cereal box that you have today versus when you grew up. Think about the Cheerios box. You could literally feed 2 kids for 2 weeks growing up. Now you're lucky to get a meal. That's shrinkflation, because the reality is nobody likes paying higher prices. Everybody loves selling at higher prices, but nobody likes buying at higher prices. They don't. So what they're going to do is they're going to try and hide it, either in the size of the container that you're buying or in the ingredients. All right, there's a lot of talk about organics, a lot of talk about Monsanto and all that stuff. Believe me, I'm in there. My wife is really in there. She loves talking about that, and she loves really focusing on the ingredients in our food and making sure our kids have healthy food, all that stuff. But if we had the same chicken that was processed in the 1950s today, it would be $8, $9, $10 a pound. That's why you have $2 and $3 a pound of chicken pumped full of chemicals. It's because of inflation. If they had to feed the chickens and coop them up the same way they did in the 50s today, they would never sell anything. They couldn't sell chicken that way because people don't have the income today to support that. That's why you have all these chemicals. Beyond people wanting to make a profit off of destruction, again, putting that aside, economically speaking, only that's one of the big reasons why you have that. Because people will not be able to afford $10 organic chicken at the way they are today. Now, in God's flow, you can get chicken, fish, steak, all of it. Call it up. Even in a famine, you're satisfied. That's God's promise for you, okay? But again, I'm talking to the average person right now, or even a believer who doesn't understand what they're supposed to do to get into God's financial flow. This is your future if you don't do that. This is your future if you don't do that. And on top of that, here's the other thing why I'm focusing on it. Again, I told you at the very beginning, I'm staying away from politics. I really am. I don't care. There's plenty of other channels for that. But when it comes to people who actually at least point out the problems, someone like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez from New York, who's been a lightning rod ever since she's been in Congress. One of the things that I saw that she did early in her congressional career was she sponsored a bill raising the poverty level. The poverty level as the government stands it right now is about $14,000 a year. Now, as you can see, that doesn't even cover half the average rent payment. So $14,000, you're lucky to be eating like a donkey's head at normal prices at $14,000 a year, especially a family. Okay. But one of the things she did is she sponsored a bill to raise the poverty level to $38,000 a year. Now, even just on the surface, nobody in Congress reads the bills anyway, but on the surface, you're at least recognizing a problem that most people have, even if the solution is terrible. That's why a lot of these people are getting a lot of recognition and publicity and even appeal, because they're at least talking about problems that people have. Even if their solutions make it worse, they're at least talking about it. And those people gain popularity. Okay. My generation, okay, I just saw this poll by Conservative Review. This is even just a few years ago. 70% of millennials want socialism. 70% of millennials want socialism. 36% want communism. That's my generation. And there's a reason for that. And you can blame schools all you want, but the reality is the economic system that your parents passed to you is not working for you. So they're voting for anything that sounds better. Even if what sounds better actually makes their life worse, at least somebody is talking about what they're going through. That gets appeal. Okay? And so if you want to change your society, not just your own household, but your society as well, you've got to change your economic thinking now. You have to. You cannot stay the same as a forever servant. You have to at least start moving to become the laborer. You must. You have to. There's no choice for you and your family and your future society. Okay? You have to. Okay? And the way you do that is by getting into God's financial flow. And we're going to show you how to do that. And the first thing to do that is to recognize what it is. It's not being a forever servant. So the moment you start going into God and saying, hey, I'm tired of being this forever servant. I'm tired of being stagnant. I want to increase for you in your kingdom. Give me a plan. Give me a plan. He'll show you a plan if you're currently working and doing everything you can to stand, but you're not being able to increase. He'll show you how. And I'll give you other tips to be able to do that. But at least knowing your route now is the best route, is the best way for you to move forward. At least knowing what you should do. Okay? So in the end, that's why we choose to leave the forever servant and at least make the next step to be a laborer. I cannot stress this enough. It is so important for you, your family, and your future, and your country to be able to do that. And we're going to help you do that, getting into God's financial flow of all the tips and tricks that are in this Bible. Again, this is a massive, massive book. Massive, massive book. And there's so much more in this than just healing, than salvation, than sin. All of that. There's so much more. And that's one of the big reasons why I chose to do content, is to be able to help you wherever you're at. I don't care where you're at. I don't care. I can't stress this enough. If you're in a foreign country, halfway around the world, if you're living in your car right now, if you're struggling to make rent payment, all right, this is for you. This is for you. I promise you. You stay here. You stay in the flow. You get into God's plan for your life, and you will never be the same. I don't care what your current circumstances are. Start believing for increase. It starts with the belief that you can. Okay? No matter, even the method comes afterwards, but the belief comes first. The belief that these scriptures get in your spirit and saying, I'm going to wake up every single day knowing that God's taking me to another level. God's taking me to increase. He is, no matter where I am today. If I'm in business, if I'm in ministry, if I'm in government, He's taking me somewhere special. He wants something special for me, okay? And that part of that special includes your finances. So with that being said, that's our discussion for today. Reigniting Your Dreams, Part 2. We're going to have Part 3, the finale, coming probably Thursday. Let's call it Thursday, okay? We're going to do that then. We're going to discuss the master, and you're going to get into a route, and God's going to start giving you dreams back that you buried. You buried your dreams. God's going to dig them up and give them right back to you. You watch what happens, okay? With that being said, you have a great Tuesday. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Take care.